Hello, everybody, and welcome to our talk. My name is Irina. I will be the moderator of this talk. And I would like to introduce Ilona Sarkisova. She's a senior experience designer and a resource manager. She graduated at human-computer interaction design field. And because of her technical background and 4 years of being a front-end developer, Ilona has a diverse experience in user interface design and development. She's worked in life science, social, e-commerce, and education domains as a part of a design team and as a team of one. In her spare time, she teaches human-computer interaction in a university master program. And Ilona is also busy blogging about UX design. So I am passing the word to Ilona. And before that, please be proactive, ask questions. Make sure to add your name or make sure you don't post anonymously. There is a prize of a year-long license for a balsamic application for the most interesting question. So let's start.
Thank you very much. And hi everyone again. I will start to share my screen and we could start. All right. I hope you're able to see the presentation. So yeah, hi again everyone. It's nice to meet you here and thank you for joining this talk about design estimations. My name is Ilona and I'm a senior experience designer here at EPAM. I believe the estimations is really important and a bit painful topic for any specialist as well as for designers. And today I'd like to share with you my experience and approach regarding task estimation in my past project. Today I'm going to show you the problem, how it appears, and what were the circumstances in my project. Also, I'll show the estimation approach, which we found and adopted for design team needs. After that, you will see the short guide, how to approach had been applied and what benefit it took for our team. So here we are, our team, a design team in this project. And we're all different, as you can see. For example, I was a team leader role. I was responsible to support the whole work of the design team. And also we have a UX designer who's supposed to create some ideas, and also visual designer who create the final design, and usability tester, the researcher who gathered the feedback from end users. Our working process is also pretty common. 2-week sprints, planning with stakeholders, and of course, giving estimations and calculation the capacity of the team. And the estimations and capacity we calculate in time, like we use hours. And one of the issues that design team has is estimation process itself. We're all Scrum, and it's okay to have sometimes like unclarity and changes, let's say, on the fly. But it's hard to say how much time you need to do the task if it's so unclear. Also, because of the design, we need to spend some time to brainstorm, to make some internal analysis and so on with the project team or with the stakeholders. And it all is all people with the different calendars and free time slots and possibilities. Each idea, of course, should be checked and confirmed. And it's not so easy to tell how much time and how much even sessions you need to confirm an idea. And how this idea or comments from team side could affect the work. There are some quotes from design team retrospective. This is the sessions where we discuss how it goes. So designers sometimes don't understand how complex the task is. During work, we dig out a lot of additional questions with which makes tasks bigger and harder, of course. Visual designers and UX, for example, needs to work together, which makes works longer. We spend time to wait confirmation or feedback from colleagues, from stakeholders, and it also affects our work. So I decided to find a way to estimate tasks, and this way should help us to solve this problem for our team. That's how I found the relative estimations of complexity, which sounds pretty complex. So let me explain it step by step. Let's firstly talk about the complexity, what it means, and then we will figure out what are relative estimations. So what the complexity mean? This is one of the basics of Scrum actually. As Scrum says, every story brings value, which is main benefit, right, for business and users. And value is what the project team is working on. This value should be determined by product owner. He or she should tell us what is the main value, right? And the project team who tell how much efforts they need to do this task to bring this value, which means to estimate complexity. To measure this complexity, in Scrum, we usually use story points. And story point could be not just an amount of time, like 1 hour or day. Story point could be an abstract measure of how complex, compound the task is. Why I think that measure of complexity could be more useful than measuring of time? Well, it helps not to chase time, but thinking about this value, right, which we need to bring. You also could include these discussions, confirmation, and so on into these estimations, which is hard to do in hours. It's easier to say to client, this task is very complex, rather than I need 2 weeks to do just one task. Also, there is no situation where someone says, I could do this work faster, so you should try better if we estimate in complexity. And usually we spend a lot of time to argue of how much time we need to complete any task. So complexity is relative, so there is no question like this at all. I divided complexity into 4 parts, let's say components, based on our design team work. But it's applicable, I believe, for any specialists. So complexity is dependency, skill level, amount of communication, and the consistency of the design solution. Let me explain it step by step, each of these components. So first of all, dependency. It means, am I dependent on other people's work? Like, for example, UX designer needs to review some visual designers' work to understand is it okay from feature standpoint, right? Or designer needs some information from product owner or business analyst to make a decision. For each complexity components, I developed this scale, which could help to measure it. For dependency, the scale is if there is no persons that you are related to and there is no work to wait for, so no complexity from dependency side. If it's one person and a little bit of work, it's low. If it's a little bit more people, then the complexity is medium. And if it's a lot of people, more than 3 persons, and unclear amount of work that you need to wait for, the complexity is pretty high. The next one is skills. It's pretty the same, the scale and meaning. So it means, do I know how to do the task? And do I know what exactly should I do and which tool or technique to use? For example, we had a situation when we need to move from Sketch to Figma, and not of each of members of our team was an expert in Figma. So we had to consider the fact that the designer needs some time to learn a new tool before to build an interface. The scale for skills is almost the same. If it's all clear and not a lot of work, there is no complexity. If the tool or technique is familiar and it's a bit of work, the complexity is low. But for example, if it's unclear what tool to use and you don't know even how to choose it, and it's unclear how much work you need to do, the complexity is high. We're almost done with this, so the next one is communication. This is the complexity, which means, like, do I need to talk to anybody? For example, we need to confirm design, first of all, with the product owner, and after that with the content team who is responsible to create the appropriate copy in the interface. So this scale is if there is no person to talk to and no questions, no complexity. And vice versa, if it's a lot of persons, more than 3 people, and then clear amount of communication iterations, even like several meetings and you don't know how much, then the complexity is high. The last one, part of the complexity is consistency. It means like, do you need to generate totally new design solution, or it's possible to reuse some components or approach or patterns from previous design? For example, designer can reuse like existing drop-downs instead of creating new ones, or you need to create totally new form which is not exist in the site right now. The scale is if the solution exists and you can reuse it completely with no question, then no complexity. If it's a big changes and these changes somehow affect the development, it could be medium or even high if you cannot understand how it could affect the development. So once again, the complexity is first of all dependency, like am I dependent on others' work? It's skills, like do I know what to do and what to use? Also, it's communication. Do I need to talk to anybody, to ask anybody? And also consistency. Do I have a similar solution in my design? All right, we discussed what it means, the complexity. Let's see what is the relative estimation, the last part of it. So Scrum also articulates that story points is an abstract unit, and it always means something. Like one story point is a half of a day or just a low complexity. To measure a task in abstract story point, you need to compare two tasks and understand how different they are. Like one is more complex and another one is easier to do. Like let's say you need to create a login form, and it sounds much more complicated than just to rename the button on this form, right? So the process of comparing is always based on the team experience. That's why each team estimations are unique. So I want to share three important things to keep in mind to use this estimation approach. To be able to estimate tasks properly, they should be clear enough to estimate, of course. At least you should understand the value that we discussed before. Also, you should decide what amount of story points could indicate that the task is too complex. It always depends on the project and on the estimation approach because story points are relative, right? For example, in our team, we just decided empirically that 16 story points could be the indicator that the task is too complex. But usually it could be 13 story points, even 8, whatever. So in the beginning, of course, of this starting to use this approach, you need to calibrate these story points. For example, you agreed that 3 story points is medium complexity, for example. And after some sessions, you understand that it's not enough or too much. You should calibrate what the story points means, what 3 story points means. So the retrospectives is the great time to do so. So don't forget to bring this topic in your retrospective. All right, in the beginning of this talk, I explained what the relative estimations of complexity is and how it could be used by the design team. And the next part, I'd like to show you how we could implement this approach in the project. There are 4 basic steps to begin to estimate complexity. First of all, you need to pick a task that you estimated in hours before, if you had this approach. Exercise estimation of complexity based on these 4 parameters that I mentioned before. After that, you should pick another one task with the hours estimations and compare these 2 tasks and do the same exercise. So estimate complexity relative to your previous task. It helps you to understand the difference. This is an example of such exercise that I conducted with my design team in this project. So initially we had 3 tasks. 2 of them were 3 story points in time, like it means, let's say 6 hours, and 5 story points, which means more hours, like some number. And then we make this exercise to understand the complexity. We went through each component of complexity, and in the end we understood the complexity estimation for each task. We also compare these tasks between each other. That's why, for example, for the first one, we have 3 story points. And the complexity analysis is the same as for the next one. But for the next one, for second one, we have 2 or 3 story points because we just felt that it could be a little bit easier. And the last one, we have also 2 story points for complexity, but for time estimations, we have 5 story points. It happened because we tried to include the communication into this time estimation, and it was hard to predict. That's why, just in case, we took a little bit more, but it wasn't any need for it if we estimated in time complexity. During 2 or 3 first sprints with the relative estimations, I was watching closely to the team overloading and like how it goes. Also, I calculated the full team capacity for the sprint. For our team, it was like that. Sometimes before, we agreed that we will use the time calculation, like 8 hours for each team member and so on. I decided to stick with this approach and see how it would work. Spoiler, we had to calibrate these numbers as well in one of the retrospectives. I constantly asked all team members to not to forget to compare tasks and estimate complexity, not time, because we're quite used to measuring time. So it wasn't easy in the beginning, but session to session, it becomes easier and clear. This is the feedback that design team had from the first sprints with estimations of complexity. Work becomes more predictable and comfortable. We spend less time to estimation and each session becomes easier and easier. As a result, we have transparent work and tasks, more accurate estimations with less efforts. Design team understands of what we need to know before to work. We start to decompose tasks better. And finally, we can count communication, confirmation, and waiting the feedback from others. We use analogy and compare tasks all the time, which helps us to understand where we are in the process. And in the end, we have less stress, overwork, and unpleasant surprises. Here's some useful link that you could take into. So to understand like Scrum itself, capacities, story points, and so on. So keep calm and estimate complexity. Thank you for your attention. I would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Ilona, thanks a lot for such an informative presentation. I'm pretty sure that everybody is very well familiar with a Scrum estimation and just traditional story points, which are not very clear to newcomers especially. This is a new approach, and so far we don't have questions from the audience, but I wanted to maybe have a quick question to you. So how exactly does the time involved in this new method? So you were talking about a functionality that required 5 story points to complete, but it appeared that it could be simplified. It could just take 2 story points instead of 5. But what if we're dealing with a functionality where everything is familiar? We definitely know what to do. We don't need to communicate that much with the rest of the team. But if you know that it's just like a big scope, everything is familiar, you know what to do, but it's just a big scope. How do you reflect that this scope will just need a lot of time to complete just because of the mechanical kind of work?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question, and let me come back to this. So here we have complexity analysis, right? And the skills says no complexity,
right?
Which is like we have generic stuff, we know what to do and so on. But if we come back to this table, which is looks quite complicated anyway, we have like a lot of work here, right? So a lot of work itself, of course, it's time consuming, right? Even if you know what to do and so on, but it's time consuming. So you could say the estimation of complexity is medium here, just because I need to do a lot of work, so I need a lot of time. I don't know how much exactly, but it's medium. And for example, for our team, the medium means 5 story point. For any other team, it could be different, like 3 story points, 8. any number which the whole team agrees on. So for us, it was like, we say medium for this, just because we need to do a lot of work. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And if I may, another question, can you just give an example of which feature you could call small or medium or like low, medium or high? Just can you bring any example of any of this?
Yeah, of course. So, for example, we have a generic task to, I don't know, to simplify the form, right? Which sounds pretty complex. And to simplify the form could be a really complex task. So you need to decompose it and so on to understand how to work on it. And in the end, we will have small pieces of this task. And one of that pieces would be like remove a couple of fields. So there is no dependency, or maybe a little bit, just to confirm that you could remove these fields just because it's useless for users. And also you know what to do and how to do it, and it's pretty easy to just remove a couple of fields from the mockup. Also, no communication a lot at all, because you know what to do. You don't need to discuss it with anyone. And the consistency is pretty low, because you just need to remove something. There is no design itself or new features itself. So the task to remove a couple of fields could be really no complexity. We could measure dependency a little bit. For example, if you need to wait a business analyst to understand what exactly you need to remove from this form. So yeah, I would say this task could be low complexity measured for our team, again, 1 or 2 story points. But for others, it could be any numbers.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. Have you tried PERT methodology to calculate estimations?
Not really. Not sure that I know what it means, but I would be happy to Google it after that, and maybe it could work. I'm pretty sure that's a great approach, and there are a lot of them, to be honest. This one has just worked for our team, and I hope it would work for other design teams. That's why I decided to share it. But no, I didn't have a chance to try it.
Okay. Maybe I could rephrase that. Did you try, or maybe you might consider, maybe for your next project, having like 3 types of estimations, like pessimistic one, realistic one, and optimistic one? Do you think this could work? Do you see any advantages or downsides of such an approach?
Yeah, I got it. Well, I saw some examples that the development team used this approach, and it works for them just because they have different solutions, like the cheapest one, the best one, let's say.
Yeah.
And this optimistic and realistic approach could work for, first of all, for development, as I can see it. For design, we're trying to do the best, first of all, and then maybe to confirm the best option, and after that think about something else. So I would say it not really fits the design process that I see in our current project. So just because we don't have these optimistic and pessimistic things, we understand that we need to do something, to research, to generate ideas, and it's hard to tell, is it optimistic or pessimistic amount of work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And there is a related question here. So how do you apply risks in estimation calculation?
It's actually a good question. Well, we have risks in each of these components of the complexity, and if we feel that it could be like a lot of people to discuss with, like some stuff or design task, or we can fail to use new technique, right? You always could say that it's a bit more complex, just in case, to have this extra story points to understand what to do in case of your fail, for example, to use the new methodology or something. So I believe risks included just into more story points. And just because we need to compare tasks between each other all the time, we could understand in which task we potentially could have some risks and give it more story points.
Okay, thank you. One more question. how to encapsulate customers' wish to try in few mock-ups in the estimations. Doesn't make sense at all.
Well, of course, if and it's pretty common actually when the customer asks you to create some options, right? Like he or she wants to see different approaches, different design to choose the best one. And I would say you could include it into the several like parts of the complexity. First of all, it's skills, of course, just because it's more work to generate two designs instead of one. And also the communication sessions, which makes task more complex, just because you need to confirm first and then second one approach and then choose the better one. So yeah, mostly skills and communication could include this extra work. But you could have the situation when you calculate all stuff together, like all story points, and understand that it's too complex. In that case, it would be better to split tasks into two different ones, like the first one for the first solution with its own complexity, and the second one is for the second solution with its own complexity. So like this, I think.
Okay, thank you. Here's one more question. Do you usually include design estimations into the full story estimation?
That's
When you work with a team. So it looks like design plus front end plus back end plus QA.
Yeah, it's a great and tricky question. Thank you for that. Well, for this particular project, we have an interesting situation where the design team has its own sprint. Like development team number one has sprint, development team number two has its own sprint, and the design team has the sprint. So that's why we didn't compare and include all stuff into the one task. But it's not really a common approach. It's just the one thing that I've seen in the one project. Mostly projects has the story, has the use case, whatever, the task story, and based on this story, you figure out the like capacities for each team member, like designer, front-end developer, and each team member should estimate the task or subtask for his own. So in that case, if you have this general approach, I believe you should include these estimations into the whole story or even epic, but the whole team should have the same scale. And if the designer has its own scale and the front-end team has its own scale, it's hard to count it all. So one of my projects has this series of workshops to synchronize all story points for the whole team and measure it in the same scales. So if you have the same scale, you could include this complexity as for designer, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question. Can we take such an approach to estimate costs of the project on a pre-sale phase?
That's interesting.
Small as one-man day, medium as three-man day, etc.
Sorry, medium for what?
It's like you have one story point as if the task is just made by one person per day, like one man day, and medium is like 3 man days, and so on.
Yeah, I see. Well, from this question, like metrics are still hours, right? Like days is still time. So if you need to understand time, for example, your customer asks you how much time you need to do this work, you could use this approach with the days. If not, I think the complexity estimation could work even for pre-sale and for rough estimations, but it could be too detailed. Maybe for pre-sales and stuff like that, it's better to use, t-shirts like small, medium, and so on, just because you will have less understanding in that stage of what to do and for the whole project, which harder to estimate.
Okay, one more question. Can you describe what is for you a one story point?
Yeah, so once again, story points are relative. I don't want to push you to use any numbers here, but I will give you an example. Yeah, so based on this, right? For us, in several sessions of these estimations, we understood that for us, for our team, 2 or 3 story points is low. Like from 1 to 3 is low. From 4 to 5 or 6 is medium, and after that it's high. And if it's more than 16 story points, it's unpredictable and it's better to decompose the task. But it works only for our team in our small world. If you have a different approach, it's totally fine. I saw the teams who estimate like low tasks as a 5 or 8 even story point, and it just works for the team. So it depends all the time which approach you will use and what would be better for you and for your team.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to thank the audience for being so active today. I think we're done with the questions. I would like to thank Ilona again for providing so much useful information and new approach about estimations, and which might actually open for some of us the door to getting familiar with some other maybe estimation practices. But this one just proves to be very, very useful for the BAs and designers. So thank you, Ilona, and thanks to our audience. We will decide which question was the best one today. And please do not go far away. We will have some outro word from the Design Z Day organizers. So we will see you there. In the meantime, thanks for attention. Thanks, Ilona, again.
Thank you.